שנה הבאה בירושלים, next year in Jerusalem. Over there in the...
Welcome to Theology in Perspective, the Bible teaching ministry of Dr. Daniel Woodhead.
Welcome back to Theology in Perspective. I'm Daniel Woodhead, and I am blessed that you're here with me today. We are in the book of Revelation, the revelation of Jesus Christ, and we are studying a number of passages in the middle of the tribulation, that 7-year period of a massive war that God has caused through Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, who's bringing this on the world to make an end of sin and sinful ones, to bring the Jewish people to him through their Messiah, the Lord Jesus, and to evangelize the world in a way that it has never been evangelized. Now, a number of events are occurring very, very close to one another, so it's difficult for me to chronologicalize them in any firm order. And I have been talking about a whole series of them, one of which has been the false prophet setting up an image in the newly rebuilt temple that the Antichrist will permit the Jews to rebuild, and that image comes alive. Now, we called that the abomination of desolation. I want to talk about that again today with a little bit more detail, because that will lead to the Antichrist making a blasphemous declaration and then beginning the largest scale worldwide persecution of the Jews that has ever happened. So I'm going to take you back to the book of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And we're going to look at two elements or two stages involving in this abomination of desolation. But I want this to be clear in your mind exactly what this is. Now, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4 say, "Let no man beguile you in any way, for it will not be, except the falling away come first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. He that opposes and exalts himself against all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits in the temple of God, setting himself forth as God." Now, this falling away here, this is the massive apostasy, and it's also making reference to the rapture of the church. But after these events, and we are in a period of massive apostasy right now, and this falling away, this apostasy, if you will lead to the rapture of the church. The church will be gone. The man of sin will be revealed. Now, he opposes God, and he exalts himself above God. You know, what's interesting is in this passage, the Antichrist is described as seating himself in the temple of God, and he's declaring to the world that he really is God. You know, in all probability, he's going to be sitting in the Holy of Holies, which is the innermost compartment of the temple. And with this, he's going to initially take over Jerusalem and the temple in particular. And he's going to seat himself in the very temple of God, and he's going to claim to be God. And by doing so, he's going to set up the second religious system of the tribulation, which is the worship of the Antichrist. The first one was the worship of the false prophet and the ecclesiastical Babylon. This is the second one now. This self-declaration of deity is going to be accompanied with miraculous signs to carry out the work of deception, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 8 to 9, which I'm going to read those so you can get that sense of who he is and what he's doing. "And then shall be revealed the lawless one, whom the Lord Jesus will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to naught by the manifestation of his coming. even he who's coming is according to the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceit of unrighteousness for them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause, God's going to send them a working of error, if you will, that they should believe a lie, and they all might be judged who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Now here he is, he's said to be energized by Satan, for it's by Satan that he's going to be brought back to life. Remember now, he had a blow to the head, he died, and he came back to life. His post-resurrection rise to power is going to be with a bunch of signs and power and lying wonders. And the aim of these counterfeit miracles here, according to the verses that we just read, is going to be to deceive men so that they will worship him and accept him as God. Now, these verses have often been interpreted both as those who heard the gospel prior to the rapture and those who fell for the lie during the middle of the tribulation. So one says that if an individual clearly heard the gospel and rejected it, he or she is not going to have an opportunity to be saved during the tribulation, because an unsaved person now will not go up in the rapture. There's much discussion and misunderstanding about what is the church. The church consists only of those that are born again, whom Christ died and he saved. People that are not born again are not in the church. Doesn't matter if somebody says they're in the church, they have to be reborn of the Spirit. So if one is not reborn of the Spirit and the rapture happens, they don't leave the earth, they stay here. If they have clearly heard the gospel and rejected it, they will not have another opportunity. Now, the other interprets the passage to strictly mean that the lie is taking the mark of the beast. Once somebody takes the mark of the beast, they're incapable of turning back and accepting the gospel, because the gospel is going to be preached worldwide by the 144,000 Jewish evangelists. Oh, some say that only one or the other is true, and others say that both are true. In any event, the mark of the beast that we looked at in our last session will surely render one incapable of hearing the gospel. Now, he's going to declare his deity in the Holy of Holies of the temple. The Antichrist himself is going to be allowed to continue for 1,260 days. That's 3.5 years. But the abomination of desolation includes something a lot different than just him and his self-proclamation of deity, for example. Furthermore, Daniel and Matthew both have passages that imply that an image or an idol is going to be set up in the temple. And that's what gives rise to this comparison of the Greek general Antiochus Epiphanes' slaughtering of a sow in the Holy of Holies about 164 BC. Now, he was a great persecutor of the Jewish people, and the apocryphal books of 1st and 2nd Maccabees describe how he tried to stamp out Jewish religion, and in doing so, he slaughtered thousands of Jewish men, women, and children. This was one of the worst acts in Jewish history. Now, Antiochus desecrated the temple by slaughtering this pig on the altar, and he forced the priests to eat pork, and he set up another idol to Zeus. Well, the Jews abandoned the temple. They just didn't want to go into a defiled place, and that put a halt to the daily sacrifices until the Jews regained control of the temple. That was during the Maccabean period, their revolution. So that was called an abomination of desolation, but that is not the abomination of desolation that Daniel spoke of and that Jesus spoke of. Now, there's another aspect of this that we see in Revelation 13, verses 11 to 15. We've looked at these in the past, but I'm bringing this back now because it's going to lead to some new material that I think this foundation, with more detail, will be helpful to know. So, starting in verse 11 of chapter 13 of Revelation, the text there reads, "And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like unto a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exercised all the authority of the first beast in his sight. And he maketh the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose death stroke was healed. And he doeth great signs, that he should even make fire come down out of heaven upon the earth in the sight of men. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by reason of the signs which it was given to him to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image of the beast, who hath the stroke of the sword and lived. And it was given unto him to give breath unto it, even to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as should not worship the image of the beast should be killed." So the second stage of this abomination of desolation is this false prophet, and we've called him beast number 2. Okay, beast number 1 is the Antichrist. Beast number 2 is the false prophet. He's going to be given authority to perform signs and wonders, and it's going to deceive the world in order to cause them to worship beast number 1, the Antichrist. And the same ideas were evident in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 8 to 12 that we read, and both of them help clarify what the abomination of desolation involves. So the great deception is climaxed when the image of the Antichrist becomes alive and men are called upon to worship the image. So the deification, or the making godlike the Antichrist, continues here. So the image is set up in the Holy of Holies that we've seen and talked about in the past to carry on this abomination of desolation. Jerusalem is going to become the religious capital of Antichrist, but Babylon is the governmental capital. And the temple is going to be the center of the worship of the Antichrist, where this living image, this puppet that becomes alive, is going to be standing. So while the Antichrist is going to be deposed of after 1260 days, that's the end of the tribulation when Jesus comes back, the image is going to remain in the temple for another 30 days beyond that, and then it will be disposed of. So the 2 stages of the abomination of desolation, lasting a total of 1290 days, are going to be 1, the declaration of deity by the Antichrist, the Holy of Holies, and 2, the setting up of his image in the same place. Now, you got the Antichrist. He declares himself God. This image comes alive. The Antichrist has died and he comes back to life. And you got the world just, whoa, wondering and looking at this guy. He will then start the greatest persecution, and I don't mean great in a good sense, greatest persecution of the Jewish people that has ever happened on this earth. Now remember, the Jews that have joined the church, I'm not talking about a church whose name is on the wall of something. I'm talking about a particular idea, those that are born again. That is the genuine church. They're in all kinds of different denominations. We are the church. We're not a denomination or a particular name. We have confessed the name of Christ. We believe that Jesus died, rose from the dead. Therefore, we are in the church that Jesus described and created. I'm going to go through a series of persecutions to let you see how Satan has been trying to harm the people of God for a long, long time. And we'll see, in many senses here, what he is going to be doing. So I'm going to go through a series of these in the Bible. Then we're going to go into a number of them after the Bible. And then we're going to talk about the one that is yet future. So this is going to take me several sessions. And I think it's important to see this put together, because then you can really get a sense that the Jews have been persecuted because they're God's people. God chose them out of the people groups of all of the earth to bring, one, the oracles of God, the Bible, and every one of the writers in the Bible are Jewish, and two, his Messiah, our Lord Jesus, who is Jewish. It's not that the Jews were better than anybody. They were smaller. He loved them, and he wanted some group to represent him in order to come into this earth to show people what God would do. And they were situated, and still are, on the eastern edge of the banks of the Mediterranean Sea, which is the gateway to 4 continents. And being the gateway to 4 continents, the traveling routes that would go through there would enable them to come in contact with people. And the people would see how wealthy, how intelligent, how well they ate, the hygienic habits they had. God chose them and gave them his laws to set them apart. And Satan has been trying to cripple them ever since. Now, let's look at these persecutions. The first one was initially announced in the Abrahamic covenant in chapter 15 of Genesis. So we're going way back here. And he said, this is chapter 15, and he said unto Abram, this is God talking to Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and shall afflict them 400 years. Now, throughout the Bible, there are many Jewish persecutions listed in the reasons for them. So, as I mentioned, over the next several weeks, we're going to examine those, as well as the persecutions that the Jews have suffered in the church age after the biblical text was finished. At least after the apostolic period. But the greatest of them will be during the Great Tribulation, when Adolf Hitler, starting in 1933 and ending in 1945, 12 years, he persecuted the Jewish people. It was Satan. He was a Satan worshiper. And those Jewish people lost 1/3 of the world's Jews. 1/3. We say it was 6 million. That was about 1/3. Zechariah chapter 13 verses 8 and 9 say that there will be 2/3 that will die in the Great Tribulation. 2/3 of the world's Jewry. Okay? Most people do not have any idea that this has been going on. So I'm just going to list, if you will, the different persecutions that are in the Bible. There were oppression in Egypt for 400 years. In the book of Joshua, when they were going into the Promised Land, the Amorites defeated the Jews at a place called Ai. Then an angel of the Lord left false gods in Israel to snare the Jews at Bochim. It was in the book of Judges. Now, Cush and Rishathaim of Mesopotamia persecuted them in the book of Judges, chapter 3. In the book of Judges, chapter 6, the Midians oppressed the Jews. In the book of Judges, chapter 10, there was servitude of the Jews under the Philistines and the Ammonites. And there was servitude under the Philistines again for 40 years that are highlighted in the 13th chapter. Now, Saul, the first king of the Jews, if you will, produced persecutions as constant warfare. 1 Samuel 14:47. In 722 BC, the Assyrians captured the northern 10 tribes. It was after Solomon. Remember, there were 3 kings now in what we call the United Monarchy: Saul, David, and Solomon. And after that, there was a civil war. In 931, the 12 tribes split. 10 went to the north under a despot named Jeroboam, and 2 went to the south, Judah and Benjamin, under Solomon's son Rehoboam. And by the time, now it was 931, in 722, the Jews in the north were so sinful that God brought the Assyrians in from the east, and they conquered the Jews and carried them away to Mesopotamia. Then the Jews in the south were just as bad. Actually, the book of Ezekiel said they were worse. So after 3 Babylonian invasions, finally the third one in 586 BC, the Babylonians captured the Jews and carted them away to Babylon. There were Greek persecutions under Antiochus Epiphanes that I'd mentioned earlier, and as an example of the abomination of desolation. Then the Romans captured Israel by Pompey the general in 63 BC. They set up persecutions too. Then the Herods ruled and persecuted the Jews as a result of being given that opportunity by the Romans. So in 70 AD, because of an insurrection of the Jews, the Romans leveled Jerusalem in 70 AD, and they slaughtered about 1 million people. Well, some Jews rose back up under a man whose name was Simon Bar Kokhba, and in roughly 132 to 135 AD, and another Roman emperor came in there, Hadrian, and he conquered the land again and killed many, many people. The Romans controlled that region for a long time. Now, you get into the early 300s AD, and you've got Constantine allowing the Christians, if you will, to not be persecuted anymore. He just issued this edict of toleration. He claimed to have been a Christian. Maybe he was. The second emperor after him decides to force Christianity on the culture, and his name was Theodosius II, and he starts persecuting the Jews in 388 AD. The Byzantines persecuted them from about 330 BC, or AD, 330 AD to 1453 AD. The Crusades, trying to free the city of Jerusalem and Israel from the Mohammedans, slaughtered thousands of Jews on the way over and the way back. The Jews were expelled from England in 1290 AD. France and England both again expelled them in 1300 AD. Then the Spanish Inquisitions of 1391 AD killed thousands and thousands, and the Jews were then expelled from Spain in 1492. There was a Portuguese Inquisition that most people aren't aware of. That happened for 3 years, from 1536 to 1539. Then the Russians persecuted them from 1825 to 1917. And some of that started with Catherine the Great. But it went on until the Soviet era. So the Russians persecuted them. The Russians had these pogroms where they went after the Jews and just started slaughtering them, and they forced them into the western regions of Russia called the Pale, roughly 1881 to 1882. which we would look at today as eastern Ukraine. By far, the largest of the persecutions happened under the Nazis, as I mentioned earlier, 1933 to 1945. Then the Hungarians during that period and after the war persecuted them from 38 until 1948. Stalin persecuted the Jews from 1939 to 53, and the Arabs and the Muslims persecuted the Jews and have been still trying today from 1948 to the present. Now, the tribulation persecutions we'll touch on after we look at some of these others, starting with the abomination of desolation, is going to be the worst one ever. The worst one ever. Now, I want to just start here with the Arab-Muslim persecutions of 1948 to the present, because these are still fresh in many people's minds, and the news used to report on these things. You can get these items now on various websites, but the mainstream media doesn't report on these. So I'm going to take you back to 1948. As a result of the Nazi persecutions, on November the 29th, 1947, the United Nations General Assembly voted 33 to 13 with 10 abstentions in favor of a partition plan that created the State of Israel. Now, over 75% of the land allocated to the Jews was just desert. But they were desperate to find a haven for the remnants of the European Jews after the Holocaust. There were so few Jews left after the Nazis had exterminated most of them. Now, the Jewish population accepted the plan, and it gave them a diminished state, in terms of the geography. The Arabs, who were intent on preventing any Jewish entry into that region, rejected it. But on May the 14th, 1948, the last of the British forces that were in that region left Haifa, and the Jewish Agency, which was led by Israel's Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, declared the creation of the State of Israel. That was in accordance with the 1947 UN partition plan. Immediately, and I mean immediately, Harry Truman, the United States president, recognized the new state. And it was followed just a few hours later by the Soviet premier Joseph Stalin. Now, there were some Arab League members, Egypt and Transjordan and Syria, Lebanon and Iraq, who all declared war on little on little Israel. And they announced their rejection of this UN partition decision. Saudi Arabia and Yemen also sent forces to participate in this invasion. So not all the world felt sympathy before to the Jews. This was a brand new chapter in this ancient persecution that was opening up. On May the 14th, 1948, the modern state of Israel was reborn. Now, I'm going to leave you there today, and we'll pick this up in our next session, because this is a fascinating story. And it's a continuation of the persecutions throughout the biblical text and throughout the church age that Satan has brought to the Jews in this long, long war against God. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you in our next session.
We hope you have been blessed by this message today on a contemporarily relevant Bible topic. Dr. Woodhead has been teaching the Bible for 25 years. He is a pastor, an author, and conference speaker on various biblical subjects. Dr. Woodhead is the Dean of the Jewish Studies School at Schofield Seminary. His seminary teaching includes the Old Testament and Biblical Hebrew. He has attended Hebrew University in Jerusalem and Hebrew College in Massachusetts. If you would like a DVD of today's program, please write us at Post Office Box 48, Hart, Michigan, 49420. Again, that's Post Office Box 48, Hart, Michigan 49420, or call us at 877-706-2479. That's 877-706-2479. Once again, 877-706-2479. The cost is $15. Let us know if you have any questions about today's broadcast. We look forward to providing you with continuing Bible messages each week on this station. God bless you.
Take us there to the land of Zion, next year in Jerusalem. B'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Oh, hear, O Israel, hear. O Lord, thy kingdom come, thy will be done next year. B'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Over there, in the, over there, in the, over there.